Hello and welcome to my channel, and welcome to this week's Wednesday Interlude, in which I shine the spotlight on Thomas Hardy. Thomas Hardy was born on the 2nd of June 1840 in Dorset in the southwest of England. Hardy was a novelist, a poet and a short story writer. Thomas Hardy was a Victorian realist in the tradition of George Eliot. He was influenced both in his novels and in his poetry by Romanticism, especially William Wordsworth. He was highly critical of much in Victorian society, especially on the declining status of rural people in Britain, such as those from his native southwest England. While Hardy wrote poetry throughout his life and regarded himself primarily as a poet, his first collection was not published until 1898, when he was 58 years old. Initially, therefore, he gained fame as the author of such novels as Far from the Madding Crowd, published in 1874, The Mayor of Casterbridge, published in 1886, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, published in 1891, and Jude the Obscure, published in 1895. During his lifetime, Hardy's poetry was acclaimed by younger poets, particularly the Georgians, who viewed him as a mentor. After his death, his poems were lauded by Ezra Pound, W.H. Auden, and Philip Larkin. Many of his novels concern tragic characters struggling through their passions and social circumstances, and they are often set in the semi-fictional region of Wessex. Initially based on the medieval Anglo-Saxon kingdom, Hardy's Wessex eventually came to include the counties of Dorset, Wiltshire, Somerset, Devon, Hampshire, and much of Berkshire in southwest and south-central England. Thomas Hardy's father, also called Thomas, worked as a stonemason and local builder. His mother, Jemima, was well read, and she educated Thomas until he went to his first school at the age of 8. For several years he attended Mr. Last's Academy for Young Gentlemen in Dorchester, where he learned Latin and demonstrated academic potential. Because Hardy's family lacked the means for a university education, his formal education ended at the age of 16, when he became apprenticed to James Hicks, a local architect. Hardy trained as an architect in Dorchester before moving to London in 1862. There he enrolled as a student at King's College London. He won prizes from the Royal Institute of British Architects and the Architectural Association. He became assistant architect in April 1862. Hardy never felt at home in London because he was acutely conscious of class divisions and his social inferiority. During this time he became interested in social reform and the works of John Stuart Mill. He was also introduced to by his Dorset friend Horace Moore to the works of Charles Fourier and Auguste Comte. After 5 years, concerned about his health, he returned to Dorset, settling in Weymouth, and decided to dedicate himself to writing. In 1870, while on an architectural mission to restore the parish church of St. Julio in Cornwall, Hardy met and fell in love with Emma Gifford, whom he married in Kensington in the autumn of 1874. In 1885, Thomas and his wife moved into Millgate, a house designed by Hardy and built by his brother. Although they later became estranged, Emma's subsequent death in 1912 had a traumatic effect on him, and after her death, Hardy made a trip to Cornwall to revisit places linked with their courtship. His poems 1912 to 1913 reflect upon her death. In 1914, at the age of 74, Hardy married his secretary Florence Emily Dugdale, who was 39 years his junior. However, he remained preoccupied with his first wife's death and tried to overcome his remorse by writing poetry. In 1910, Hardy had been appointed a member of the Order of Merit and was also, for the first time, nominated for the Nobel Prize in Literature. He would be nominated again for the prize 11 years later. Hardy's first novel, The Poor Man and the Lady, finished by 1867, failed to find a publisher. He then showed it to his mentor and friend, the Victorian poet and novelist George Meredith, who felt that The Poor Man and the Lady would be too politically controversial and might damage Hardy's ability to publish in the future. So Hardy followed his advice, and he did not try further to publish it. He subsequently destroyed the manuscript, but used some of the ideas in his later work. After he abandoned his first novel, Hardy wrote two new ones that he hoped would have more commercial appeal. Desperate Remedies, published in 1871, and Under the Greenwood Tree, published in 1872, both of which were published anonymously. It was while working on the latter that he met Emma Gifford. In 1873, A Pair of Blue Eyes, a novel drawing on Hardy's courtship of Emma, was published under his own name. A plot device popularised by Charles Dickens, the term cliffhanger is considered to have originated with the serialised version of A Pair of Blue Eyes, in which Henry Knight, one of the protagonists, is left literally hanging off a cliff. In his next novel, Far from the Madding Crowd, published in 1874, Hardy first introduced the idea of calling the region in the west of England where his novels are set Wessex. Wessex had been the name of an early Saxon kingdom in approximately the same part of England. Far from the Madding Crowd was successful enough for Hardy to give up architectural work and pursue a literary career. Over the next 25 years, Hardy produced 10 more novels. Subsequently, the Hardys moved from London to Yeovil and then to Sturminster Newton, where he wrote The Return of the Native, which was published in 1878. Hardy published Two on a Tower in 1882, a romance story set in the world of astronomy. Then, in 1885, they moved for the last time to Millgate, a house outside Dorchester designed by Hardy and built by his brother. There he wrote The Mayor of Casterbridge, published in 1886, The Woodlanders, published in 1887, and Tess of the D'Urbervilles, published in 1891, the last of which attracted criticism for its sympathetic portrayal of a fallen woman and was initially refused publication. Its subtitle, A Pure Woman Faithfully Presented, was intended to raise the eyebrows of the Victorian middle classes. Jude the Obscure, published in 1895, met with an even stronger negative response from the Victorian public because of its controversial treatment of sex, religion and marriage. Furthermore, its apparent attack on the institution of marriage caused further strain on Hardy's already difficult marriage, because Emma Hardy was concerned that Jude the Obscure would be read as autobiographical. Some booksellers sold the novel in brown paper bags, and the Bishop of Wakefield, Walsham Howe, is reputed to have burnt his copy. In his postscript of 1912, Hardy humorously referred to this incident as part of the career of the book. After these hostile verdicts from the press, Its next misfortune was to be burnt by a bishop, probably in his despair at not being able to burn me. Despite this, Hardy had become a celebrity by the 1900s, but some argue that he gave up writing novels because of the criticism of both Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Jude the Obscure. The well-beloved, Hardy's last novel to be published in book form in 1897, was first serialised in 1892. Other novels published by Hardy include The Hand of Ethelberta, published in 1876, The Trumpet Major, published in 1880, A Laodicean, published in 1881, and The Woodlanders, published in 1887. Shortly after Hardy's death, the executors of his estate burnt his letters and notebooks, but 12 notebooks survived, one of them containing notes and extracts of newspaper stories from the 1820s, and research into these has provided insight into how Hardy used them in his works. In the year of his death, Mrs. Hardy published The Early Life of Thomas Hardy, 1841 to 1891, compiled largely from contemporary notes, letters, diaries, and biographical memoranda, as well as from oral information in conversations extending over many years. This is widely believed to be Hardy's autobiography masquerading as a biography. Hardy's work was admired by many younger writers, including D.H. Lawrence, John Cowper Powys, and Virginia Woolf. Hardy's birthplace in Bockhampton and his house, Millgate, both in Dorchester, are now owned by the National Trust. Thomas Hardy became ill with pleurisy in December 1927 and died at Millgate just after 9 p.m. on the 11th of January 1928, having dictated his final poem to his wife on his deathbed. He was 87. In this brief introduction, I could only hit some of the highlights, so I was unable to cover the fascinating literary themes in Hardy's novels, his poetry, or his complex relationship to religion, his sense of place, and his influence on other writers. But if you'd like to discover more about Thomas Hardy's life and work, there are several biographies to choose from. I own all 14 of Hardy's published novels, and The Life of Thomas Hardy by Florence Hardy, containing the early life of Thomas Hardy, 1840 to 1891, and the later years of Thomas Hardy, 1892 to 1928. I also have Thomas Hardy, His Career as a Novelist by Michael Millgate. Thomas Hardy, The World of His Novels by J.B.Bullen. Thomas Hardy, A Study of the Wessex Novels, the Poems and the Dynasts by H.C. Duffin. And Hardy the Novelist, an essay in criticism by David Cecil. I also own the complete poetry and the complete short stories. In the resources section below, you will find links to Project Gutenberg of several of his works. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of Thomas Hardy's works and what you thought of them.